Well, the unprofessionalism and incompetence of the Trump team of lawyers continues to amaze. The Trump team of lawyers includes the criminal defense lawyers representing Donald Trump's co-defendants in the Florida federal case brought by Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, charging Donald Trump and his two co-defendants with illegal possession of classified documents and violations of the Espionage Act. Those co-defendants are both employees of Donald Trump, Walt Nauta and Carlos de Oliveira. A filing in the case on Friday by Jack Smith's team in reply to accusations by the Trump team of lawyers complaining that the prosecution has not provided them everything they've asked for in discovery. In that filing, a new jewel of Trump lawyer incompetence appears on page 58 of Jack Smith's filing in a discussion of the video evidence in the case, which of course includes video obtained from the closed-circuit security video system at Mar-a-Lago. Here's what this filing says. Quote, counsel for Trump has never reported to the government being unable to view the footage as produced and as detailed below whenever the government has received notice from the other defendants that they were having difficulty. It has responded quickly. In an email on October 24th, 2023, months after the materials were made available to the defense, counsel for de Oliveira, for the first time, mentioned problems that he had encountered when attempting to access specific closed-circuit TV files that the government had obtained from the Trump Organization and produced in discovery. The government immediately arranged a call with counsel and technical personnel from the FBI to help resolve the reported issues. During the call, counsel for de Oliveira explained that he did not own or have access to a laptop or desktop computer and was instead attempting to review the entirety of the government's discovery on a handheld tablet. The government then offered to lend him a laptop computer to facilitate his review. Counsel for de Oliveira accepted the offer, and on November 1st, 2023, the government hand-delivered a computer to him. Since then, whenever de Oliveira's counsel has raised technical issues with viewing specific Trump Organization closed-circuit TV files, the government has promptly assisted with resolving these inquiries, providing tips and examples, and offering to set up calls as needed. So Jack Smith's team of FBI agents and prosecutors has to serve as the genius bar for at least one Trump lawyer who doesn't even own a computer. In Jack Smith's filing on Friday, responding to the Trump lawyers' complaints about discovery, the prosecutors said discovery requests must be based on specific demands tied to the case for items material to preparing the defense. Instead of meeting those standards, the defendant's motion seeks non-discoverable materials based on speculative, unsupported, and false theories of political bias and animus. Many of the requests are so generalized that it is difficult to decipher what they seek. Others reflect pure conjecture detached from the facts surrounding this prosecution. For still others, the government has already furnished the defendants with what they seek to the extent that the law requires. As the exhibits and an accurate timeline attest, the defendant's narrative overlooks the fact that various federal agencies confronted and appropriately responded to an extraordinary situation resulting entirely from the defendant's conduct, where the defendants perceive bias, weaponized use of authorities, and a sham referral, all attributed to an undifferentiated Biden administration. The record shows only different government agencies with specific portfolios and responsibilities at work to solve an increasingly vexing and concerning problem. That is hardly surprising, and it in no way, shape, or form supports the hyperbolic claim of politically motivated operatives launching a crusade against President Trump the defendant's legal problems are solely of their own making. After spending the weekend with Jack Smith's brief, Judge Cannon issued an order today scheduling hearings for next Monday to consider the handling of classified information during the trial. As is standard at this stage of the case, Judge Cannon will have a separate hearing for the lawyers on each side of the case, beginning with the defense. The order says that from 9:30 a.m. to 2 p.m., the court will hear argument from defense counsel for all defendants outside the presence of the special counsel. Consistent with the protective orders entered on September 13th, 2023, defendants Nauta and de Oliveira may not be present. Defense counsel shall be prepared to discuss their defense theories of the case in detail and how any classified information might be relevant or helpful to the defense. The judge's order says that at 3 p.m. the same day, quote, the court will hear argument from the special counsel outside the presence of defendants or defense counsel. The special counsel shall be prepared to discuss its classified information motions and all follow-up items from the sealed ex parte hearing held on January 31st, 2024. Simon, let's begin with South Carolina and what we saw in those election returns. What do you learn when an incumbent president is running essentially unopposed in a primary like that?
Well, that he's going to win the nomination and that Dean Phillips should find something else to do. I mean, Dean Phillips is, giving Ron DeSantis a run for the worst candidate of the 2024 cycle, I think, and for certainly the most ridiculous. And so, look, our nomination is settled. Joe Biden's going to be the nominee. I think Trump will be the nominee on their side. I mean, you just did an interesting segment, Lawrence, about, the legal vulnerabilities he has on the disqualification issue. And Nikki Haley's given him a much stronger run than we expected. So, Joe Biden is cruising to become the nominee, raising a lot of money. He had great numbers, jobs numbers on Friday. So, we're in good shape on our side. Party's unified. We're ready to go.
South Carolina launched Joe Biden to the nomination 4 years ago. He had lost badly in Iowa, lost very badly in New Hampshire, then came into South Carolina and won. And so here we are 4 years later. South Carolina voters knew what you just said. They knew Joe Biden's going to be the nominee. But 126,000 of them or so said, I'm still getting up. I'm going to the polls. I want to register my vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I mean, I thought that the guest or the man that you showed the clip of, said something really important, is that he's not noisy. He just gets the job done. And I think that that's going to be a huge part of the Biden argument, right, which is that the country's better off. He's been a good president. He's a workhorse, not a show horse, right, in the old language we used to use. And he's just making things better. He gets up every day. He goes to work for the American people. And the contrast between him and Donald Trump, who's not campaigning from the White House, but the courthouse every day, and is, the most unfit man to run for president in our history. This contrast is going to become, I think, brighter and brighter every day. And even though there have been some tough polls in the last couple of days, last week, we also had a lot of good polls for Joe Biden. We saw movement in a bunch of polls and him ahead. So my guess is that what's going to happen is that as people really understand that the economy is doing better, and that it's a Trump-Biden race, you're going to start to see Biden's numbers come up and hopefully get him a little bit of a lead in the coming weeks.
So we're hearing from the Senate tonight that Mitch McConnell is, along with other senators, at least now, abandoning the bipartisan, border security, immigration bill that he helped negotiate. And there was, in the times past, this, first of all, would have been impossible. But if it happened, it would have been such a campaign win instantaneously for President Biden. I just wonder if all of this sounds too confusing for the voters who care about this issue.
We're going to find out. I mean, I will tell you that having to run for keeping the border in chaos and letting Putin win in Ukraine, I don't know, man. That's a pretty tough agenda to take to the American people in the coming months. And I think this is a sign of the Republicans living in this incredible bubble that they're in, that they're so disconnected from reality and from, what the consequences of their actions. And they've retreated increasingly into this right-wing bubble that's disconnected from the real world. And somehow they've convinced themselves that this is a good strategy, that, making the country far less safe and making sure the West is endangered and the United States and the world are far less secure. That's a good strategy to get reelected. I mean, I think part of what's happening here for the Republicans and what's shocking is that their central arguments against Biden are all evaporating, right? The economy is strong. We're not in recession. Inflation is way down. Crime is way down. There isn't a war on energy. I mean, all these things that they've been saying the last couple of years are all evaporating. The one thing they had that they could take to the bank was the border. And now they're in the process, I think, of blowing that too. And when you're a party that's been overrun by extremists and extremism, this is what happens, right? I mean, that they make crazy decisions. And I think this is really, I don't think they're going to be able to defend this over time. They may benefit in the short term, but my God, try to explain this to anybody after all the noise they've been making about the border. Then when finally there was a smart bipartisan bill, they turned it down. I think this is going to be tough for them.
Joy, this is just an amazing book to read in so many ways. It is so beautiful. The frame you found, the love story, is just perfect, especially for now. When you're covering territory that people have been through before, as you know, you have to find that frame they haven't found. And this really is it. But beyond that, you've got all sorts of stuff in here that I just did not know. I didn't know that he was on Omaha Beach on D-Day, and it just goes on and on.
Yeah, I mean, he was part of the Red Ball Express, and this was a segregated unit. They were the Transportation Corps. He served in Antwerp. He was on Omaha Beach. He was in France, in Liège. And, these troops, these black troops, had to face the same gunfire. They had to face the same danger. They didn't have the same dignity or respect, but they had to make sure that the transportation units were constantly supplied. So they had to go back and forth across that dangerous beach and walk over bodies and run over white soldiers' bodies. They did the same service, but when they came home, they faced the same fascism in the land that they had fought to preserve the democracy of.
Myrlie Evers lived a very, very long life after this as the first of what you call wife of a civil rights martyr. And I want to go to your audiobook, because it's a beautiful audiobook, to hear your passage about this and about the burdens and about the expectations and the weight of what not just Myrlie had to live with, but Coretta Scott King afterwards and others. Let's listen to this.
When you are the wife of a civil rights martyr, everyone wants to take your picture. You make the covers of Ebony and Jet, and even Life. The photographers prefer that you appear demure and serious, befitting your tragedy. But you must neither smile nor cry, nor should your children, because it would ruin the photograph. You and the children must always be neatly and tastefully dressed, and you must never yell or scream, because that would be undignified. Your face must always remain perfectly composed, with enough powder and lipstick to make you pretty, but not so much that you appear gaudy. The newspapers will print your home address, and the curious will find your street, stand in front of your house, and point. The home of the martyr is a public attraction, and people will knock on your door and pose your children on the lawn, or even on the carport where their father's blood still casts a shadow that all the scrubbing bubbles and bleach you could muster could not remove. When you speak, you must talk of grace and forgiveness, and say something profound about faith in God and his unchangeable will. Myrlie Evers had to learn these rules because one wrong move, one errant word or flash of public anger could ruin the legacy of the man she loved. It was Myrlie Louise Evers, just 3 months over 30 years old, who was the first of the national civil rights widows.
30 years old.
Yeah, and that's actually my favorite chapter. It was hard to write that chapter because I had developed such a personal relationship with Myrlie and was so bound up in her story. And it took me a long time to actually write the chapter where Medgar is killed. I cried through half the chapter writing it, or maybe that was the most journalistic thing to do. But I was so bound up with the two of them and their relationship and their love. But to me, what I loved about this chapter is that it's a reminder that of the national civil rights widows, the ones we know, the great Coretta Scott King, the great Betty Shabazz, Myrlie suffered that loss first. She was the first of the nationally known civil rights widows. So there was no one for her to turn to say, how do I do this? I'm 30 years old. I've just lost the love of my life. My children watched him bleed to death. They were 9, 8, and 3. I'm a single mother now who has become a housewife, so now I have to earn a living. What do I do? And how do I make sure that the legacy of this man, is preserved and given its dignity? And I'm angry. I'm angry. They took away from me my love, my future, but I have to sort of stifle that down. And there was no one to teach her. The only person she knew, they were killing black men all throughout Mississippi. But on a national level, no one was at that level. These other widows weren't walking out to Dan Rather in their face with a CBS News crew. She was. And everything she did, she was terrified that it would actually destroy Medgar's legacy because of her deep anger and rage. And I think it's a lesson for black women, there is a thing, right, where you're never supposed to be angry. For women in general, just always be demure, always be perfect, always be, of perfect sort of character and talking about grace. And that's not what she wanted to do. But she was the template. She was the first to learn how to have to do this 2 years before Betty Shabazz had to do it, 5 years before Dr. King's widow, Coretta Scott King, had to do it. That's really what bonded them, is that they were in this sorority none of them wanted to be in, but she actually was the template.
Julia, there's so much more in this book to cover. I just can't recommend it enough. I've learned so much. I love this book so much. It's so full of heart. It's so full of important information. Joy Reid's new book and audiobook, which will be available everywhere tomorrow, is Medgar and Myrlie, Medgar Evers, and the love story that awakened America. Joy, thank you very much for awakening me to this story.
It means so much to me. I know we both care about the 60s so much. That means so much to me.
And thousands of readers are going to be awakened to this amazing. Thank you very much, Joy.
Thank you, my friend.